All the way back in the year 1992, a Lovecraft-inspired survival horror game called Alone in the Dark was released. And according to Wikipedia, because I wasn't born yet, it's one of the early examples and therefore trendsetters of the genre as a whole, with the fixed camera angle, limited inventory space, and a focus on puzzles. Just no police stations with 13 different color-coded keys. And being as influential as that sounds, even with less mainstream popularity, it's clear why the series continued with direct sequels, reboots, movies, and now a reimagining. Yes, thanks to THQ and their developer Pieces Interactive, Alone in the Dark was remade and released on March 20th, 2024, and that's on all major platforms. Unfortunately, due to the game not selling well enough, the developer was completely shut down, which I think is terrible no matter how you slice it. It currently costs $40 when the game is not on sale, but that brings me to the whole point of this video. I'd always heard that Alone in the Dark is not a very good game, and the studio closing only cemented that for me as a passerby not really paying too close attention. Now, over a year later, I want to determine for myself, and hopefully for you watching this video, if the game was worth any of your money, and more importantly, your time. To start, I guess I should tell you how I truly approached this. I never deeply read reviews, but I saw the general sentiment online, like the main taglines of articles and things like that. I expected to boot the game and walk out in like 10 minutes just like Kanye did at the Diddy trial. But nevertheless, the starting hook of the game is very strong. Edward Carnby and his client, Emily Hartwood, are headed to the Derceto Manor. It's a place for high-profile people to get their heads straight, be that rehab or otherwise. Regardless, Emily's uncle is there, but he seems to be in trouble based off of a letter he sent. And upon arrival, you find out that he's been missing. Good thing that she brought a PI. The first thing you do in the game is choose who to play as of our dynamic duo. Well, actually, the first thing you're going to do in the game is realize, hey, that's the third gay cowboy in Brokeback Mountain. And me, of course, being a man of culture during Pride Month, chose to stick with Mr. Carnby. And the ensuing 5 chapters across roughly 7 hours were some of fun, fear, and frustration. The game shines as you explore the halls and the rooms of Derceto, unlocking new areas and finding more clues about both puzzles and the greater narrative as a whole. It's here that I think you truly see the characteristics of Edward being an investigator. Learning more about the staff, clients, and the history of Derceto itself had me pretty well enthralled for every note that I found. The writing here is good, and each piece has narration by the characters that wrote them, which is mostly pretty good as far as performances as well. One issue I had on my 9070 XT 9700X NVMe PC is that while my frame rate was really good, high and maxing out at all times with my refresh rate, the stuttering as you move from area to area, hell, even room to room sometimes, as the game loads in the background is pretty atrocious. Other than that, the only issues I had visually is that the game tends to look a little blurry, and whether that's upscaling or depth of field, no matter turning anything on or off, I couldn't get it to go away. But for the vast majority of the manor, there's a fine attention to detail in terms of environmental storytelling, clutter, and generally pretty architecture. Character models don't look bad either, you never want to get too close, but it especially looks decent on our protagonists. Although, as you move around the game world, there is something that I want to point out that is pretty funny. When you start sprinting in the game or, running, Edward does this kind of light jog, and the way he just kind of leans into that jog, as a father, I can say that this is exactly the run that you do when your child is off somewhere screaming or something that they've been hurt, and you're just like, man, I really got to deal with this right now. Let's say you were having a conversation with another parent or something. And continuing that sad dad mentality, whenever you sneak within the game, it is laughable that you can even call that like a proper crouch. He's ducking his head slightly. He is like Gandalf in the Hobbit's house. I never watched Lord of the Rings. I was too busy having sex. But regardless, that is exactly how I crouch over when I am trying to play hide and seek. But okay, anyway, kind of continuing on with the world building and things like that, I think it all does really good. There are a plethora of different environments that you're going to see throughout the game in a way that I'll get into now. I'm not going to spoil the point of the story. There are supernatural elements. It really leads into that kind of down south, that bayou magic that you got going on there. And it even leads into some other theologies as well, to some degree. But what I really find interesting, both from a visual perspective, gameplay variety, maybe not so much, but visual differentiation, is that one of the main loops of the gameplay is that Jeremy, the uncle of Emily, he has left a talisman behind that we are actually able to travel into his memories. And in doing so, this is going to help our investigation in getting closer to figuring out where he is and also deal with some trauma of our own. Now, I will say, you're going to be going through memories more than some guy who peaked in high school, to put in perspective. In doing so, you're going to be seeing different landscapes, such as snowy landscapes, pure arid deserts, tombs, things like that, as well as going deeper into the swamp. And really, that's all I'll say about the story itself. Across around 7 hours of playtime to have it all wrapped up, I think very succinctly too. I think there's a definite ending, and I think it was satisfying enough. Yeah, it was pretty good. I mean, there's a few moments where the game does feel a little bizarre. It almost feels like an episode or like maybe an American Horror Story season, although only told from the perspective of our protagonist instead of an ensemble cast. And in that way, I mean, I think it's pretty charming, and it is this strong story hook and decent pacing and involvement and general mystery that kept me going, because what I'm going to get into now is the gameplay, and yeah, it's not entirely it, I'll be honest with you. So I've already kind of talked about how exploring and puzzles work within the game. It's exactly as you'd expect. There's not really a limited inventory system other than how much ammo you can hold. But much like what I assume Silent Hill and Resident Evil are like, it does require finding the right tool for the job a lot of times. And, sometimes that means you can open up more doorways or finding the right nozzle to, turn off the air pressure so you can walk by without getting hurt somewhere. And then, of course, there's actual puzzles within the game, unlocking safes and a bunch of other things that I could maybe show on screen here, potentially, that are just kind of too wild to explain otherwise. But a general summation, the game does make you think sometimes, finding the right numbers, and sometimes, visually speaking, just looking and finding the right placement order. The exploration and the puzzles of the game are never my concern. What are my concern? You heard me mention earlier that, we would be going through the talisman to going to other locations. Well, most of the time, that is when combat occurs. The game kind of blurs that line a little bit, and you're going to start to lose a little bit of your sanity as the game goes along, and therefore those worlds kind of mix a little. So combat encounters do get thrown at you unexpectedly later on. However, one issue I have with this game, and I didn't really know that it was an issue at first, was that Derceto and your combat sections are separate. So the tension in, say, Resident Evil as you go through, the Spencer Mansion as opposed to the Derceto Mansion, is that you're going through these rooms and you're looking for puzzle items and things like that, but you also could have enemies attacking you at any time. Obviously, you could clear out rooms just like in this. But the issue is that a lot of times there's a stark difference in, hey, there's vines all over the walls and stuff. I know there's going to be enemies here. Or the room is perfectly sunny and clear. Nope, probably no enemies. And the unfortunate part is, and this is where we'll get into where I think the game is fundamentally broken, is that anytime the game tries to switch shit up, it fumbles. In the few times that it tries to surprise you and quickly switch between these worlds, the combat encounters are always so laughable. The enemy placement, whether it be for a surprise attack or not, is very unforgiving in a lot of ways, and you can be overrun pretty much immediately. Throw into that, at one point in the game, there is a chase sequence where there's allegedly so many enemies that all you should do is run. But funny enough, all the enemies spawn in before you get to the bar on the ground, or however the game dev works, of where Edward's going to say, I gotta run, I gotta get out of here. Because to me, as a player, I see enemies pop up, I stand and I fight. This isn't Doom. So I'm going to sit there and I'm going to try to kill them as quickly as possible, as efficiently, so I don't have too many. Well, I didn't walk far enough for him to say, hey, I gotta run. So I died to what should have been a chase sequence, trying to fight. And another thing to point out, enemies are boring. And in doing so, in moments like that, man, I gotta say, this game has very stiff movement overall. It doesn't feel like you're running very well. I got stuck on a couple of different, environmental objects throughout the world as I was running around. There was a couple times where I would swing a melee weapon too close to a stair, and then when I started climbing this, the ladder or whatever, I would actually go down and fall through the map, but I could only replicate it in one spot in the game, so maybe that was just neither here nor there. Maybe if the team didn't get shut down, they could have fixed something like that. So, I don't expect anything to ever get fixed like that, but something you should know. Saves are very forgiving within the game, like quick saves, auto saves, not a big deal, but it was something that was annoying and added to kind of that frustration, as I mentioned. Enemies within the game themselves are also fairly boring. There is, in the second half, some decent variety, as far as how they actually play, but visually speaking, they're all kind of fairly similar. And the final boss within the game is a little frustrating. It's not telegraphed very clearly, and it's not hard. It's just, I think the way you're supposed to actually deal with it in the second phase is just kind of annoying. But with that being said, a visibly passable game with a narrative hook that's pretty strong and gameplay that suffers. Honestly, even the camera fights against you seemingly at times. Its final saving grace for me was actually the sound design of the game. Whether it be footsteps as you're walking here or there, or the door as it swings open, or even the enemies themselves, which actually do sound pretty good at times. It's all very good, and the thing that really won me over was the very whimsical and at times dark soundtrack. It adds to pretty much every bit of atmosphere within this game in a positive way. And yeah, I genuinely loved it. The only thing that could have done better in my eyes at this point was it could have had a musical number like in The Altars, which I just reviewed. You should go check that out next. So if you were to ask me if this game is worth $40 at full price, no, I don't believe so. There are too many hiccups in quality for me personally, but there is a strong base to what this game actually is. It is absolutely worth your time when you determine what price you're going to pick the game up for on sale. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'm going to leave this on a final note from my daughter. Lydia, do you think this game is any good?
Yes.
Sweet. Alright, thank you. Goodbye.